If you're going to cry, Natalie, wait until after I finish toasting the woman who finally makes me happy. My husband lifted his champagne glass as if he were announcing a promotion instead of ending our marriage in front of 46 people. The private dining room at the Halston Hotel in Charlotte went so quiet I could hear ice settling in the water glasses. A string quartet had stopped halfway through, at last. White roses climbed the windows overlooking the city. Gold candles flickered beside menus embossed with our initials. It was supposed to be our 10th anniversary dinner, the kind of expensive, polished celebration Grant Holloway loved because it made other people believe our life was flawless. He had chosen my dress himself. Navy silk, fitted at the waist, elegant enough for the society page photographer he had invited without telling me. Wear this, he had said that afternoon, fastening the zipper while I stood in our bedroom. I want everyone to remember how beautiful you look tonight. At the time, I thought it was tenderness. Standing beneath the chandeliers while Grant smiled at the room, I realized he had dressed me for my own public execution. Then Melanie Cross stepped through the doorway. She was our neighbor from 3 houses down. A 33-year-old real estate agent with honey blonde hair, a careful laugh, and a talent for making cruelty sound like concern. For nearly a year, she had brought banana bread into my kitchen, borrowed serving dishes, cried on my shoulder about her lonely marriage, and given my 8-year-old daughter, Emma, a box of vintage dolls she said had belonged to her grandmother. That night, Melanie wore a red dress and the expression of a woman arriving to claim property she had already been promised. Grant crossed the room, wrapped one arm around her waist, and kissed her. Not a confused kiss. Not a drunken mistake. A slow, deliberate kiss held long enough for every guest to understand that my humiliation had been rehearsed. Emma's pink lemonade glass clicked against the table. "Mom," she whispered, "why is Dad kissing Ms. Melanie?" No one answered. Not Grant's mother, Diane, who sat rigidly beside a white anniversary cake. Not his younger sister, Claire, whose eyes dropped to her lap. Not the 6 executives from Holloway Development who had spent years calling me the heart behind Grant's success. Not the neighbors who had eaten at my table, or the wives who had sent me sympathy texts every time Grant missed a school event because of business. Melanie smoothed the front of her dress. "Children understand more than adults think," she said. "It may be healthier for Emma to learn the truth without screaming." Her voice was soft, almost maternal. That made it worse. I looked at Grant. He was 39, tall, handsome, and still wearing the charcoal suit I had helped him choose for a magazine profile 2 months earlier. His public face was warm and controlled. His private face appeared only when a contractor challenged him. When Emma interrupted a call, or when I asked why another transfer had left our joint account. He returned to the head of the table and rested his hand on the back of my chair as if he still had the right to touch anything connected to me. "Natalie has been a loyal wife," he announced. "But loyalty isn't the same as love. At some point, a man has to admit when his marriage has become a habit." A few people shifted uncomfortably. I heard someone near the bar whisper, "My God." Grant continued because he had always mistaken silence for permission. "I built a life bigger than either of us imagined. I need a partner who can stand beside me in that life, not someone who resents it from the kitchen." The insult was so calculated that, for a second, it emptied me of pain. Before Grant, I had been a senior brand strategist at a Charlotte advertising agency. I had pitched national campaigns, managed teams twice my size, and bought my own townhouse at 27. When my grandfather died, he left me a substantial inheritance because, as he wrote in his final letter, I was the only grandchild who called when I did not need anything. Grant had a contractor's license, a pickup truck, and a dream of building affordable townhomes. I invested $640,000 of my inheritance into his first development. When the project ran over budget, I sold my townhouse. When payroll was short, I cashed out investments. I designed the company logo, wrote investor decks, negotiated with vendors, and answered client emails while nursing Emma at 3 a.m. Then, when Emma was 2, Grant convinced me to leave my job. "Just until the company stabilizes," he had promised. "You'll come back as an owner, not an employee." The company stabilized. Grant expanded. The promise disappeared. And now, in a room decorated with money that had begun as mine, he was describing me as a resentful woman trapped in a kitchen. I stood slowly. "You brought your mistress to our anniversary dinner so you could do this in front of our daughter?" Grant gave a small laugh, the one he used when he wanted a room to believe I was irrational. "Don't use Emma to manufacture sympathy. She deserves honesty. Her father deserves happiness." Melanie moved toward Emma. "Sweetheart, none of this is your fault. Your mom is emotional right now, but," I stepped between them and caught Melanie's wrist before she could touch my child. "You will never call my daughter sweetheart again." Melanie's smile vanished. Grant grabbed my upper arm. His fingers tightened through the silk. "Stop making a scene," he said under his breath. I looked down at his hand, then back at him. You invited 46 people to watch you replace me, and I'm making the scene? His jaw hardened. He leaned close enough that only I could hear him. I prepared a reasonable agreement. Sign it tonight, and you can keep a small house, a decent monthly allowance, and enough dignity to tell people this was mutual. What agreement? The one that protects everyone from your instability. There it was. Not guilt. Not apology. A threat wrapped in legal language. You planned this before tonight. I plan everything. His grip tightened. That's why I have a company and you have a closet full of clothes I paid for. You started that company with my inheritance. His smile barely moved. Try proving it after 10 years of shared finances. A pulse beat behind my eyes. What exactly do you want me to sign? Property waivers. A non-disparagement clause, temporary custody terms. Nothing complicated. Temporary custody? You're upset. Emma needs stability. I stared at him. The affair was only the stage. Emma, the house, my reputation, the company, those were the real targets. You think you can humiliate me in public, take my daughter, and pay me to disappear? His gaze went flat. Without me, you are nobody. You don't even know what your life costs. My hand moved before fear could stop it. The slap cracked through the dining room and bounced off the mirrored wall. Someone gasped. One of Grant's college friends muttered, "He earned that." Grant stood motionless, one side of his face turning red. For the first time that night, his perfect expression broke. The man beneath it looked less like a wounded husband than a furious executive whose employee had refused an order. I was somebody before you, I said. And I will be more after you. I reached for Emma. She was trembling so hard the bow on her dress shook. As we moved toward the door, she looked over her shoulder at the anniversary cake, at her grandparents, at her father beside another woman. Then she asked the question that hurt more than the kiss, the threat, or every silent face in the room. Mom, am I a habit too? I dropped to my knees in the hallway and held her face between my hands. No, my throat burned, but I made my voice steady. You are not a habit. You are not a burden. You are the reason I will never let anyone make us feel disposable. She wrapped her arms around my neck. Behind us, the dining room doors opened. Grant followed, furious now that we were away from the audience. You walk out with her, I'll call my attorney tonight. She lives with me. She lives in my house. Our house. Check the paperwork. The way he said it stopped me. Melanie appeared behind him, holding his champagne glass. You should go, she said. This is already traumatic enough for Emma. I looked at her, then at Grant. You broke into my marriage, stood at my anniversary dinner, and now you're worried about my daughter's trauma? Melanie's eyes sharpened. I didn't break into anything. Grant came to me because he was lonely. You made him feel invisible. I made him rich. Grant stepped closer. Leave before security removes you. The cruelty of that sentence almost made me laugh. The dinner reservation was under my name. The deposit had been charged to a card connected to my trust. Half the guests had accepted invitations I had designed. But Emma was clinging to me. And I understood that winning a hallway argument would cost her more than it would give me. So I walked away. Outside, cold March rain had begun to glaze the hotel driveway. The valet attendant was bringing around cars while guests avoided looking directly at us through the glass doors. I had just opened the back door of my SUV when a young server in a black vest hurried outside without an umbrella. Mrs. Holloway? He looked terrified. Yes? My name is Caleb. Daniel Mercer asked me to give you this if anything happened tonight. Daniel had been Holloway Development's controller for 7 years. Grant fired him 3 weeks earlier and told everyone Daniel had mishandled vendor payments. I had called to check on him, but his number had been disconnected. Caleb handed me a thick manila envelope. When did he give you this? I asked. Yesterday. He said Mr. Holloway would probably announce something at dinner. He said not to hand it over until you left without your husband. Where is Daniel now? I don't know. He just said he was sorry he waited so long. A black town car pulled under the awning. Caleb glanced toward the hotel doors and lowered his voice. He also said you should not go home tonight. My skin went cold. Why? He said the locks might already be changed. Grant appeared behind the glass, phone pressed to his ear. When he saw Caleb speaking to me, his expression changed. Get in, I told Emma. Caleb backed away as Grant pushed through the doors. Natalie. What did he give you? I climbed into the driver's seat and locked the doors. Grant struck the window with his palm. That belongs to my company. The rain distorted his face through the glass. I started the engine. Mom, Emma said from the back seat, Dad looks scary. I know. Are we going home? No. We're going to Grandma's. Grant stepped in front of the SUV. For one reckless second, I thought he might force me to choose between hitting him and staying. Then the valet manager shouted, and Grant moved aside. As I pulled away, Melanie stood beneath the awning in her red dress, watching me with none of the triumph she had shown upstairs. Her arms were folded tightly across her body. She looked worried. That scared me more than her smile had. My mother lived 25 minutes away in a brick ranch house near Matthews. By the time we arrived, Emma had cried herself to sleep. Mom opened the door in flannel pajamas and took one look at my face. What did he do? Everything. She did not ask for details. She carried Emma inside while I held the envelope against my chest. At the kitchen table where I had done homework as a teenager, I opened it. There was a flash drive, copies of bank transfers, 2 notarized documents, a corporate resolution, and a letter from Daniel. Natalie, if you are reading this, Grant has moved ahead with the plan. I should have told you earlier. I was afraid of losing my career and then afraid of what he would do if he knew I kept records. The signatures are not yours. The transfers came from accounts funded by your inheritance. Call an attorney before 8 a.m. Do not contact Grant. Do not sign anything. Most important, do not let Emma leave your sight. My hands began to shake. The first notarized document was a quitclaim deed transferring my interest in our home to an LLC called Red Cedar Holdings. The signature looked exactly like mine. I had never signed it. The second document authorized the sale of the house for $410,000 less than its appraised value. Closing was scheduled for 9:30 the next morning. Melanie Cross was listed as the authorized representative for the buyer. I turned to the corporate resolution. It removed me from any beneficial interest in Holloway Development and confirmed that I had voluntarily waived all claims arising from premarital contributions. Again, my forged signature appeared at the bottom. Mom came back into the kitchen and read over my shoulder. He is trying to erase you, she said. I plugged in the flash drive. Folders filled the screen: wire records, internal emails, audio files, photographs, draft legal filings. I clicked the most recent audio. Grant's voice came through the laptop speakers. Natalie signs whatever I put in front of her. If she asks questions, I tell her it's for Emma's future. Then Melanie laughed. And after the house closes? She'll take the settlement. She has no income, no recent work history, and no appetite for a public fight. You're sure about custody? My lawyer drafted the declaration. The anniversary dinner will help. She'll either explode in front of witnesses or collapse. Both work for me. I paused the recording. The slap. The photographer. The guests. The grip on my arm. He had not merely expected my reaction. He had designed it. Mom pulled out a chair. What declaration? I opened the folder marked family. Inside was an emergency custody petition Grant planned to file at 8:30 the next morning. It described me as financially dependent, emotionally volatile, and recently suicidal. It claimed I had threatened to flee North Carolina with Emma. Attached were screenshots of text messages I had never sent. One read, "Sometimes I think Emma would be safer if we both disappeared." Another read, "I will burn your company down before I let you leave me." My phone buzzed. 23 missed calls from Grant. Then a new message appeared. "Bring Emma home now, and I may still tell the court you cooperated." Before I could respond, another message arrived from an unknown number. "Mrs. Holloway, this is Grant's attorney. A judge will hear our emergency petition at 8:30 a.m. Failure to appear may result in immediate temporary custody being granted to your husband." I looked at the clock. It was 1:12 a.m. In less than 8 hours, Grant intended to take my home, my daughter, and the company built with my money. Then I noticed one more file in Daniel's folder. It was labeled, "Original Ownership, Do Not Let Grant See." I opened it. The first page was the incorporation agreement for Holloway Development, signed 10 years earlier. Under voting ownership, beside my name, was a number Grant had spent a decade making sure I forgot. 51%. For several seconds, I thought the 51% had to be another forgery. Then I recognized my grandfather's attorney's signature on the final page. When Grant founded the company, my grandfather had insisted that any business receiving my inheritance had to give me controlling ownership. I remembered sitting in a conference room while men in gray suits explained voting shares, capital contributions, and fiduciary duties. Emma had been a newborn. I had slept 3 hours the night before. Grant kept rubbing my shoulder and saying, "Don't worry about the legal noise. We're building this together." Over the years, he put routine documents in front of me between school pickups and grocery lists. He told me they were insurance renewals, banking updates, or tax forms. At some point, I stopped seeing company reports. When I asked, he said my shares had been diluted during expansion and that ownership was mostly symbolic anyway. According to Daniel's records, none of that was true. Grant had created amended ownership schedules showing himself with 92%. He had submitted copies to lenders, investors, and vendors. But the original operating agreement required my written, notarized approval before any transfer or dilution of my voting interest. Daniel had found no valid approval. Instead, he had found 4 versions of my signature. My fear did not disappear. Grant still had money, attorneys, employees, and a reputation powerful enough to make strangers doubt me. But for the first time that night, fear had company. Anger sat beside it. At 1:40 a.m., I called Laura Bennett. Laura and I had worked together years earlier when she was in-house counsel for one of my agency's largest clients. She had since become a family law attorney known for handling divorces involving closely held businesses. I had not spoken to her in 3 years, but she answered on the 4th ring. "Natalie? My husband is filing for emergency custody in less than 7 hours. He forged my signature to sell our house at 9:30. I think I own 51% of his company." There was a pause. "Start at the beginning," she said. I did. At 2:15, she told me to photograph every page, upload copies to a secure link, and email the audio files without altering their names. At 3 o'clock, she had contacted a real estate litigator, a forensic accountant, and an attorney who handled corporate fraud. At 4:20, she called back. "Do not respond to Grant. Do not go home. Keep Emma with you. We'll meet at the courthouse at 7:45. Can he really take her? He can ask. Asking is not winning. What about the house? We are filing an emergency notice of disputed title before the closing office opens." "And the company?" Laura exhaled. "If these originals are authentic, your husband did not just cheat on you. He may have spent years committing bank fraud, securities fraud, and forgery while using your majority-owned company as his personal kingdom." The words should have crushed me. Instead, they steadied me. At 6:30, Emma woke on my mother's couch. Her eyes were swollen, and she was still wearing the pale blue dress from dinner. "Are Dad and Ms. Melanie married now?" she asked. "No, are you and Dad still married?" "Right now, yes. But we are going to live separately." "Because he kissed her? Because he made choices that hurt our family and because I have to keep us safe." She picked at the ribbon around the doll Melanie had given her. "Did I do something?" He sat beside her. "No part of this is because of you. Dad said you get too upset." "When did he say that?" "A lot. He said sometimes moms make kids scared because they can't control feelings." My stomach tightened. Grant had been preparing more than legal documents. He had been planting a story inside our child. "Do I make you feel unsafe?" I asked. Emma thought seriously. "You make me take medicine when I'm sick, and I hate that. But no. Despite everything, I smiled. That is fair." She leaned against me. "Can I come with you? I need you to stay with Grandma for a few hours." Her body went stiff. "Dad said if you ever left me somewhere, it meant you didn't want me." That sentence revealed the depth of his cruelty more clearly than any forged deed. I held her until she stopped shaking. "I will come back. Grandma will keep her phone beside you. You can call me whenever you need. I am not leaving you. I am fighting for you." At 7:42, I met Laura outside the Mecklenburg County Courthouse. She wore a black suit, carried 2 leather bags, and did not hug me until after she had checked whether Grant or his attorney was nearby. "You look like hell," she said. "I feel worse." "Good. Judges trust exhausted mothers more than polished liars." It was the first joke anyone had made, and I almost cried from gratitude. Grant arrived at 8:03 with his attorney, Bradley Shaw, and his mother. Diane wore dark glasses and avoided my eyes. Grant looked rested. He had changed into a blue suit and covered the red mark from my slap with makeup. When he saw me, he put on a face of wounded concern. "Natalie, you could have handled this privately. You announced your mistress at our anniversary dinner." I was honest. "You forged my signature." His expression did not change, but Bradley's did. Grant leaned closer. "You have no idea what you're holding. I have enough to stop you." Diane finally looked at me. "Please don't destroy the company," she whispered. "Hundreds of families depend on it." I stared at the woman who had watched her son kiss another woman in front of Emma. "Then you should have asked Grant not to use it as a weapon." The hearing lasted 38 minutes. Bradley described me as unstable, vindictive, and financially dependent. He presented printed screenshots of the false messages and affidavits from 2 Holloway Development employees claiming I had threatened Grant at the dinner. Then Laura played the audio of Grant discussing how my reaction would help his custody petition. She showed the judge metadata proving the threatening texts had been created using a desktop messaging simulator, not sent from my phone. She introduced the disputed deed, the scheduled below-market sale, and Grant's message ordering me to bring Emma home. Grant's attorney asked for a recess. The judge denied emergency custody, ordered that Emma remain with me temporarily, prohibited either parent from removing her from the county, and appointed a guardian ad litem to assess the family situation. She also warned Grant that using a child to pressure the other parent could affect future custody decisions. Outside the courtroom, Grant caught my elbow. "You think this means you won?" Laura stepped between us. "Touch my client again, and the next filing will be for a protective order." Grant looked past her at me. "You are tearing down Emma's future." "No," I said. "I am stopping you from selling it." At 9:18, the title company suspended the closing. At 9:26, the county accepted our notice disputing the deed. At 9:31, Melanie called me. I watched her name flash across my phone and let it ring. She called again. Then she sent a message. "You don't understand what Grant will do if this deal fails." I forwarded it to Laura. "Do you think she's afraid of him?" I asked. "Maybe," Laura said. "Or maybe she's afraid the money is disappearing." By noon, we were sitting in a conference room with Daniel Mercer. He looked 10 years older than he had at the company Christmas party in December. His hair was uncombed, and a purple shadow marked the skin beneath one eye. "What happened to you?" I asked. "Grant's security director followed me to a parking garage after I copied the server files. He said I had stolen company property. We disagreed." "Did Grant order it?" "I can't prove that." "Why did you wait?" Daniel lowered his head. "Because I liked my salary. Because my wife has multiple sclerosis and our insurance came through the company. Because every time I told myself I would speak up, Grant promoted me or threatened someone else. None of those excuses are good enough." Laura slid the original operating agreement toward him. "Is this authentic?" "Yes. I found it in offsite archives after Grant told me to destroy old corporate records." "Why fire you?" "I refused to certify a lender report. It listed Grant as the sole controlling member. I told him I would not sign unless he produced Natalie's valid transfer documents." "What did he say?" Daniel looked at me. "He said you would sign anything once he had custody leverage." My hands curled beneath the table. Daniel opened his black binder. "There's more. Red Cedar Holdings isn't Melanie's company. She is only the registered agent." He turned a page. "The managing member is Travis Cole." I knew the name. Travis was a civil engineer Grant had hired on a coastal development near Wilmington. He was married, 42, and had been photographed beside Melanie at 3 charity events. Daniel placed a stack of bank records in front of us. "Melanie has been moving money from Grant to Red Cedar, then from Red Cedar to an account controlled by Travis. They plan to sell the house to themselves at a discount, refinance it, and transfer the proceeds." Laura looked up. "So Grant was stealing the house from Natalie, and Melanie was stealing it from Grant." Daniel nodded. "That is my best reading." A dark, humorless laugh escaped me. Grant had called me a habit because he believed Melanie saw him as a prize. In reality, she saw him as an unlocked safe. "That explains her panic," I said. "Not all of it," Daniel replied. He showed us a series of wires totaling $1.8 million from Holloway Development to consulting entities linked to Melanie and Travis. Some payments had been coded as land acquisition fees. Others were disguised as marketing retainers. "The company is overextended," Daniel said. "Grant borrowed against future projects to cover earlier shortages. If the investors discover these transfers, the Tuckerman Square development collapses." Tuckerman Square was Grant's biggest project, a $120 million mixed-use development he planned to unveil at an investor reception in 2 days. "Why schedule the house sale now?" I asked. "He needed cash before the reception. The bank had requested additional collateral." Laura tapped the operating agreement. "And if Natalie owns 51%, Grant may have lacked authority for major borrowing." "He did lack authority," Daniel said. "That is why he fabricated the amended resolutions." My phone rang. It was Emma's school. The principal told me Grant had arrived during lunch and demanded to see her. The temporary order had not yet reached the school system. Because he was her father and listed as an authorized pickup, staff brought Emma to the office. By the time the principal became concerned, Grant had taken her outside. I stood so quickly my chair struck the wall. "Where is she now?" "We don't know." The next 47 minutes were the longest of my life. Laura called the courthouse. The principal called police. I called Grant until my voicemail filled. My mother drove toward the house. Daniel contacted the company's vehicle manager and learned that Grant's SUV had just passed through the security gate at Holloway Development's headquarters. I reached the building as 2 police cars turned into the lot. Grant stood beside the fountain with Emma, surrounded by employees pretending not to watch. He had bought her a chocolate milkshake. To anyone passing, he looked like a father sharing lunch with his daughter. Emma saw me and ran. "Mom!" I dropped to my knees and held her. Grant spread his hands. "This is ridiculous." I picked up my own child. "You knew there was a court order." "I knew there was a temporary misunderstanding." A police officer asked Emma whether she wanted to leave with me. She nodded, then looked at Grant. Dad said if I didn't come, the police would put Mom in jail. Every employee close enough to hear became very still. Grant's face tightened. I was trying to keep her calm. You terrified her so she would obey you, I said. He lowered his voice. You are going to regret embarrassing me here. The officer stepped closer. Sir, I suggest you stop talking. As I walked Emma to my car, she pulled my sleeve. I recorded him. What? She held up the small purple watch my mother had given her for Christmas. It had a voice memo button Emma used to record songs. Grandma said if I ever felt scared, I should make noise or record what happened. Dad forgot it does that. In the car, I played the file. Grant's voice filled the speakers. You need to tell the lady at court your mother screams, Emma. Tell her Mom says she wants to disappear. If you don't, your mom may go to jail, and you'll never see me again. Emma's recorded voice was tiny. But Mom never said that. Then Grant answered. It doesn't matter what happened. It matters what keeps this family under control. I closed my eyes. Laura listened through my phone and said, send me the original file now. That recording became the first twist Grant could not blame on an angry wife, a fired accountant, or edited evidence. It was his own voice coercing his daughter. That evening, Claire called me. I need you to come to my parents' house tomorrow, she said. Dad is forcing Grant to explain the financial mess before the investor reception. Why should I walk into another room full of people who watched him humiliate me? Because I didn't know about the forged documents. You knew about Melanie. Silence. That was answer enough. How long? I asked. 4 months. And you said nothing? Grant told us the marriage was over privately. He said you were refusing to accept it and using Emma to keep him. You watched him kiss her in front of my child. I know. Claire's voice broke. I will regret that for the rest of my life. But Dad found something else. Something Grant hid from all of us. Please come. The next afternoon, I arrived at the Holloway family home with Laura, Daniel, and a copy of Emma's recording. My mother stayed with Emma. Grant sat at the head of the dining table as if he still controlled the room. Diane sat beside him, pale and sleepless. Claire stood near the windows. Grant's father, Robert, was at the opposite end with a folder in front of him. Grant began before I sat down. Natalie is exploiting private marital problems to seize the company. I placed the operating agreement on the table. I don't need to seize what I own. Robert looked at the 51% line and then at his son. Is this real? Grant did not answer. Daniel did. Yes. Grant turned on him. You stole confidential records. I preserved evidence you ordered me to destroy. Laura played the audio from the anniversary plan. Then she played Emma's recording. Diane covered her mouth. Claire began to cry. Robert did not move until Grant's voice said, it doesn't matter what happened. It matters what keeps this family under control. Then he stood and struck the table with both hands. You used my granddaughter to manufacture evidence? Grant's composure cracked. Everyone is acting like Natalie is innocent. She abandoned the business. She stopped contributing. She wanted the lifestyle without the pressure. I raised your child and kept your company alive, I said. You folded laundry and made dinner. Daniel opened his binder. She personally guaranteed your first 3 loans, negotiated the Midtown parcel, and covered $286,000 in payroll during the 2018 shortfall. Grant's eyes flashed. You were paid to keep books, not take sides. I kept the books. That's why you're afraid. The doorbell rang. Claire opened it. A broad-shouldered man in a rain jacket stepped into the room carrying a banker's box. I recognized him as Melanie's husband, Owen Cross. I had met him twice at neighborhood cookouts. He worked as an emergency room nurse and often covered night shifts. Grant stood. What is he doing here? Owen set the box on the table. Delivering the part of the truth your girlfriend forgot to tell you. He removed printed photographs of Melanie kissing Travis Cole outside a Wilmington hotel. Then came messages recovered from a shared tablet, airline reservations to Costa Rica, and screenshots of conversations about moving money. One message read, Grant is easy. He thinks rescuing me proves he is powerful. Another read, once Red Cedar closes on the Holloway house and the Tuckerman funds clear, I disappear. Grant read the messages twice. No, he said. Owen gave a bitter laugh. That was my first word too. You fabricated this with Natalie. I didn't know Natalie had a problem until 3 days ago. I hired a private investigator because my wife was draining our savings and lying about listings. Grant looked toward me as if I had arranged his betrayal. You knew? I learned yesterday. And you let me walk into this? The question was so absurd that even Claire stared at him. You brought her to our anniversary, I said. Do not ask me to protect you from discovering she treats you the way you treated me. Robert pushed the photographs aside and opened his folder. There is more. He placed a mortgage document on the table. It showed a $3.4 million commercial guarantee secured by the Holloway family home. Diane's face went white. I never agreed to that. Robert's signature appeared at the bottom. He looked at Grant. Neither did I. The room changed. Until that moment, Diane had been grieving the collapse of her son's image. Robert had been furious about the company. Now both understood that Grant had forged his father's name and risked the home they had lived in for 31 years. Grant stood too quickly, knocking his chair backward. It was temporary collateral. Tuckerman closes, everyone gets paid. You gambled our house? Diane whispered. I protected the business. You protected yourself, Robert said. Grant looked around the table and saw that every person he had counted on was moving away from him. Then his phone rang. He glanced at the screen. Melanie. He answered on speaker. Where are you? He demanded. Her voice was breathless. Grant, Daniel kept originals in the offsite archive. Travis says if those records reach the investors, Red Cedar is finished. You need to get there before Natalie does. Grant stared at Daniel. Daniel's face drained of color. What archive? Laura asked. But Grant was already moving toward the door. Daniel grabbed his keys. The storage facility on Old Pineville Road. The lender files, original ledgers, and notarized member records are there. Robert blocked Grant's path. You are not destroying another document. Grant shoved his father hard enough to send him against the wall. Diane screamed. By the time I reached the driveway, Grant's SUV was tearing away. Daniel ran to his car. Laura called 911. I climbed into the passenger seat. And we followed. Halfway to the storage facility, smoke appeared above the warehouses. Daniel whispered, no fire trucks passed us with sirens screaming. When we turned onto Old Pineville Road, orange flames were climbing through the roof of the unit that contained the only original records capable of proving I owned Holloway Development. The fire had already consumed 4 storage units when we arrived. Firefighters blocked the driveway. Black smoke rolled across the road, carrying the chemical smell of melting plastic and wet insulation. I saw Grant's SUV parked crooked near the gate. He stood beside a patrol car, arguing with an officer who would not let him cross the tape. When he noticed me, he pointed toward the burning building. This is your fault, he shouted. You turned a private divorce into a criminal circus. I stared at him through the smoke. You came here to destroy evidence. I came to protect company property. From whom? He opened his mouth, but Daniel answered from beside me. From the truth. A fire investigator separated us. Security footage showed a white utility van entering through the rear gate 12 minutes before the smoke alarm activated. The driver had used an access code assigned to Travis Cole. Grant had arrived 6 minutes later and tried to force open the burning unit before employees stopped him. Whether he had planned the fire or merely planned to take what survived, no one could yet prove. The officer told him not to leave the county and took his phone for examination after Laura showed the emergency dispatcher the messages about the archive. Daniel stood behind the tape with tears in his eyes. The ledgers were in there, he said. Original loan files, vendor contracts, notarized resolutions, everything. Not everything, Laura said. She opened her briefcase and touched the incorporation agreement I had brought to the family meeting. We have this. One original agreement won't prove the full pattern, Daniel replied. Grant will say later documents superseded it. My phone rang. Diane's name appeared on the screen. I almost ignored it. Then I remembered Robert hitting the wall and answered. Natalie, she said, breathing hard, Claire found 3 boxes in our attic. What boxes? Grant brought them here last Christmas. He told us they contained old architectural samples. Robert wanted them out, but Grant said the storage facility was full. Daniel grabbed my arm. Ask her what color the labels are. What color are the labels? Diane covered the phone and called to someone. Then she returned. Blue, green, and yellow. Daniel closed his eyes. The originals are color-coded by category. Blue is ownership. Green is lending. Yellow is land acquisition. Grant had moved the most dangerous records away from the archive months earlier, probably planning to destroy them privately when he no longer needed them. His arrogance had saved me. He trusted his parents' attic because he believed no one in his family would ever question him. Do not touch anything else, Laura told Diane through my phone. Photograph the boxes where they are. We are sending an independent records custodian and law enforcement. Grant heard enough to understand. His face changed. For the first time since the anniversary dinner, he looked afraid rather than angry. That was the second major twist. The fire had not erased the proof. It had exposed how desperately he needed it gone. Then a red sedan stopped near the barricade. Melanie got out wearing jeans, a raincoat, and no makeup. The glamorous woman from my anniversary dinner had disappeared. She hurried toward Grant, but 2 officers intercepted her. "Travis won't answer," she said. "Grant, tell them I had nothing to do with this." Grant stared at her. "You told me to come here. I told you the records were dangerous. I did not tell Travis to burn anything. You were leaving with him." Melanie glanced at me, then at the officers, calculating which truth might save her. "Grant moved the money," she said. "He used my license in Red Cedar because he couldn't have the purchases traced to him." Grant laughed once, without humor. "Now I used you?" "You did." "And Costa Rica?" Her silence answered. Grant stepped toward her, but the officer held him back. Melanie reached into her purse and removed a small external drive. "I copied every message and every account statement," she said. "I knew he would blame me if the financing failed." Laura looked at her. "You are admitting you participated." "I am admitting Grant directed it." "No," Grant said. "You begged me to get Natalie out of the house." Melanie turned on him. "You said she was weak. You said she would sign because she had no life without you." The words hung between us. At the anniversary dinner, Melanie had stood beside Grant as if she had defeated me. Now she was offering him to investigators in exchange for her own survival. I felt no pleasure in watching it. Only clarity. Neither of them had loved the other. They had recognized the same hunger and mistaken it for devotion. Laura arranged for the drive to be copied in the presence of counsel. The files gave us what the burned archive might not have: messages between Grant, Melanie, and Travis discussing false invoices, hidden transfers, the house sale, and the plan to provoke me at dinner. One message from Grant read, "Once Natalie loses custody, she will sign whatever keeps her close to Emma." Another read, "The investors don't need the real ownership schedule. They need confidence." By midnight, the lender financing Tuckerman Square had frozen its next draw. The title company reported the forged deed. Robert gave investigators permission to recover the boxes from his attic. Grant was not arrested that night, but his world had begun to close in through court orders, subpoenas, and people who had finally stopped protecting him. The investor reception was scheduled for the following evening at the Vantage Club, a glass-walled venue 40 floors above Uptown Charlotte. Laura advised me not to attend unless necessary. Daniel disagreed. "Grant will go," he said. "He thinks if he stands in front of the investors and acts confident, he can turn this into a bitter divorce story." "What can I legally do?" I asked. Laura looked at the original operating agreement, the recovered records, and the company bylaws. "As the verified holder of 51% voting control, you can call an emergency member meeting. You can suspend an officer for suspected fraud. You can appoint interim management. But you have to do it properly, not theatrically." "I want both." She raised an eyebrow. "Properly and theatrically?" "He humiliated me in a room he controlled. I want the truth delivered in a room where he expects applause." Laura considered that. "Then we do not ambush him with gossip. We serve corporate action supported by evidence. The spectacle will be his response." At 5 o'clock the next evening, 2 hours before the reception, we held an emergency member meeting in a conference suite at the Vantage Club. Notice had been delivered to Grant, the minority members, and the board according to the bylaws. Grant arrived with Bradley and 2 private security guards. Robert came as a minority investor. Daniel came as a witness. An independent corporate attorney supervised the vote. Grant refused to sit. "This meeting is invalid. Natalie abandoned all operational involvement years ago." "Operational involvement is not ownership," the independent attorney said. Bradley whispered to Grant, but Grant pushed past him. "My wife is using stolen records supplied by a disgruntled employee and a jealous mistress." Laura placed certified copies of the recovered ownership ledgers on the table. "The records came from your parents' property. Your father authorized their recovery. Your own communications identify them as authentic." Grant turned to Robert. "You gave her company files?" "I gave investigators boxes you hid in my attic after forging my name on a mortgage," Robert said. Grant's shoulders dropped a fraction. The vote proceeded. My 51% suspended Grant as chief executive and removed his authority over company accounts pending an independent forensic audit. Robert voted with me. 2 smaller members abstained. The board appointed an interim restructuring officer recommended by the lender. At 6:12, Grant Holloway stopped being the man in control of Holloway Development. At 6:14, he tried to order security to remove me. The guards looked at the interim officer, who shook his head. That small moment gave me more satisfaction than the slap. Grant had built his identity around rooms obeying him. Now even the men he had hired waited for someone else's permission. The reception began at 7 o'clock. Nearly 200 investors, brokers, contractors, local officials, and reporters gathered beneath suspended lights while renderings of Tuckerman Square rotated across a 30-foot screen. Grant had refused to leave. Bradley urged him to cancel, but Grant insisted on speaking. He believed performance could still outrun evidence. He walked onto the stage to scattered applause. Tonight, he began, we are here to celebrate a project built on family, trust, and the future of Charlotte. I entered with Laura, Daniel, Robert, Diane, and Claire. The applause faded. Grant saw us and gripped the podium. This is a private business event, he said. I stopped near the front row. So was our anniversary. A reporter lifted her phone. Grant forced a smile. My estranged wife is experiencing an emotional crisis. Out of respect for our daughter, I will not discuss private accusations. Laura handed copies of the corporate resolution to the lead lender, the project's principal investors, and the chamber representative. The interim restructuring officer walked onto the stage. Mr. Holloway, he said, you were suspended as chief executive at 6:12 this evening. You do not have authority to present this financing proposal on behalf of the company. The room erupted in murmurs. Grant looked at the officer as if he had spoken another language. You work for me. Not anymore. The screen behind them went dark. Then Daniel connected a presentation prepared by the forensic team. We did not show lurid photographs or private messages unrelated to the company. We showed facts, my original capital contribution, the 51% ownership agreement, forged amendments, unauthorized loans, money routed to Red Cedar, and the attempted below-market transfer of my home. Then the audio played. Natalie signs whatever I put in front of her. If she asks questions, I tell her it's for Emma's future. The room became completely still. Grant stepped away from the podium. This is edited. Daniel displayed the forensic verification report. Grant pointed at me. She is destroying this company because I fell in love with someone else. My mother had wanted to attend, but I asked her to stay with Emma. Still, I heard her voice in my mind, do not let him turn theft into romance. I walked onto the stage. You did not lose your company because you cheated, I said. You lost control because you forged signatures, stole assets, manipulated lenders, threatened an employee, and used our child as leverage. Grant's face reddened. You would have nothing without me. The old sentence no longer fit the room. I looked at the screen showing the original wire from my inheritance. This company began with my money, my credit, my work, and my trust. You did not create me. You used the years I spent supporting you to convince everyone I had never existed. The chamber representative removed his event badge. Our organization cannot endorse the project until the investigation and audit are complete. The lead lender announced that financing was suspended. One investor closed his folder and said, loudly enough for reporters to hear, I do not invest with a man who steals from his own majority owner. Then Melanie appeared at the back of the room with her attorney. She had agreed to provide evidence in exchange for being considered separately in the investigation. Owen stood several feet behind her, not as support but as a witness to the end of their marriage. Grant saw her and made one last desperate attempt. Tell them Natalie planned this. Tell them she threatened you. Melanie looked at the cameras, then at him. No. You planned the anniversary dinner to make her look unstable. You told me once she lost custody, she would give up the shares and the house. That was the third major twist, and the one Grant could not survive publicly. The woman he had displayed as proof of his new happiness confirmed that she had been part of his plan. He stared at her. I left my family for you. You left your family for yourself, she said. Owen's expression did not change. He simply handed Melanie a document through her attorney. My divorce petition, he said. Your belongings are in storage. You will not return to our home or contact our sons except through counsel. Melanie closed her eyes. Grant looked toward Diane. Mom. She stood beside me. I can forgive a son for failing, she said, her voice shaking. I cannot protect a man who taught my granddaughter that love means control. Grant turned to Robert. His father looked away. No one shouted. No one struck him. His destruction was quieter and more complete, investors withdrawing handshakes, attorneys collecting records, reporters documenting every contradiction, employees reading the resolution that removed his authority, and his own family refusing to become a shield. When he came down from the stage, he stopped in front of me. Think about Emma, he whispered. I thought about Emma when you made her wonder whether she was disposable. I thought about her when you tried to leave her without a home. I thought about her when you taught her to lie so you could win. Do not use her name to hide your shame again. He had no answer. The months that followed were not easy. Real life did not become beautiful just because the villain lost the microphone. The Tuckerman project was delayed, then sold to another development group under court supervision. The forensic audit uncovered enough unauthorized transfers and forged documents for state and federal investigators to pursue charges. Grant eventually pleaded guilty to multiple financial crimes rather than face a trial that would expose every record. He received a prison sentence, restitution obligations, and strict limits on future business activity. Melanie pleaded to lesser charges after cooperating. Travis was charged in connection with the transfers and the storage fire. Owen kept his home and focused on his sons. I did not celebrate any of them. Their consequences were not trophies. They were the cost of choices they had believed other people would pay. The court granted me primary custody of Emma. Grant received supervised contact before his sentencing and could write to her afterward. I never poisoned her against him. I did not need to. I told her the truth in language an 8-year-old could carry. Her father loved her, but love did not erase harmful choices, and adults were responsible for earning trust back. Holloway Development survived after selling 2 projects and replacing most of its leadership. I could have kept Grant's name on the company and collected the profits. Instead, I approved a restructuring, protected the employees who had not participated in the fraud, and sold my controlling interest once the business was stable. With part of the proceeds, I opened Brooks House Creative in a renovated brick building in Charlotte's South End. I hired 4 women returning to work after caregiving, divorce, or financial abuse. Daniel became our finance director after his wife's medical coverage was secured. Laura remained my attorney and became the friend who never again allowed me to disappear into someone else's life. Diane visits Emma twice a month. Our relationship is careful, not magically repaired. She apologized without asking me to absolve her. I stayed silent because I was afraid of losing my son, she told me. I almost lost my granddaughter instead. Robert sold the family house after the fraudulent lien was cleared. He and Diane moved somewhere smaller, by choice rather than force. Claire testified in the custody case and stopped asking me to forgive on a schedule that made her comfortable. A year after the anniversary dinner, Emma came to my office on opening day. She painted a yellow sun on a piece of poster board and wrote beneath it in purple marker, "Nobody here is disposable." I framed it in the lobby. Sometimes clients ask about the sign. I tell them my daughter wrote our first company policy. I wear heels again, but not because a man chose a dress and wanted the room to remember how beautiful I looked while he broke me. I wear them because I like the sound of my own steps on a floor no one can sell beneath me. I used to think the anniversary dinner was the night Grant destroyed my life. Now I understand it was the night he made one fatal mistake. He humiliated me so publicly that I could no longer help him hide what he was doing privately. He raised a glass to the woman who made him happy. I walked out holding the hand of the girl who made me brave. And in the end, that was the only toast that mattered.